Hello, everyone, and welcome to enVision Together, going to our next level of best podcast. This week, I'm so pleased to share with you a guest. Her name is Saril Vasquez, and she's going to tell you lots of things about health and hair and how to make things better. But you know what? We're going to have her go ahead and introduce herself in her own way. So please go ahead and welcome.
Thank you, Pamela. It is such an honor to be here today to share the microphone with you and pour into your amazing community. So I'm gonna, do my best to give some value, but just a little bit about me. As you said, my name is Saril Vasquez, and I'm a multi-certified functional medicine practitioner that specializes in reversing hair loss naturally. And I used to work in the medical field, the conventional medical field. I worked in diagnostic imaging. I worked with specialty pharmacies in the area of market development. So I was visiting a lot of doctors, and a lot of them were my friends. And when I got hair loss at the age of 24, I went over to them after all the years I had developed relationships with them, and I said, "Hey, remember me? I brought you the cookies. Now it's time for you to help me." I actually created a binder of labs that literally was maybe 3 or 4 inches wide. And I created a glossary, a table of contents for them, where I pointed out every single marker that was out of range. And I even was starting to learn how to read labs just to help them help me. And so these people that knew me, that were my friends, that were doing their best to take care of me, they said, "There's nothing we can do except slow it down." So I was distraught. I was just devastated by that. But I did the spironolactone. I did the different therapies that they gave me, and everything would work a little bit, but it would give me horrible side effects. And so as somebody who was born and raised in Manhattan, I got this little bit of this funky edge. It's like the city of dreams in a way. I know California is also, but you see a lot of people do amazing things. And I realized one day that I had been telling myself a gigantic lie. And that lie was that I've tried everything. And there's so many people with hair loss and thinning that are literally saying the exact same thing. And when I realized that there was no possible way that I could try everything in every single combination, what about the things that weren't even invented yet? Like, it just wasn't possible.
Wow.
And so that was when I made a commitment that I was going to figure this out or die trying. And if I thought I had tried everything, like, I really tried everything after that, because I spent $75,000 that I did not have.
Wow.
I had to finance my home. I sold a car. I got into a car that wasn't moldy. I took out debt from credit cards, did balance transfers with 0 interest. Like, I just figured it out. I just kept going. I didn't know that it was going to cost me that much. I just kept going, until I got where I needed to go. But I did that. And then, I was getting some results. I noticed that, oh my gosh, my hair is starting to fill in a little bit, and there's less hair falling out. And so I was happy with the regrowth and with that, but I still had this massive amount of thinning all over my head. And it was literally like my hair was see-through. I was single at the time. I had just broken up with the guy I thought I was going to marry. I'm happily married now, thank God. But I thought I was going to marry him. And I broke up with him because he cheated on me with a girl that was 10 years younger. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, is this really my story? I go and dump this guy so that I can go age so quickly, so drastically, so soon after.
Can I just tell you that I'm just stuck when you said some girl that was 10 years younger, because you look so young yourself. I'm like, how young does she have to be 10 years younger?
Oh, but listen to this. She was 23. I was 33. He was 38, but he was stuck on video games.
Oh my goodness.
So literally, I dodged a bullet.
Oh, that's what I'm about to say. Blessing in disguise. Okay.
Yeah, well, and also because it gave me the fuel that I needed to say, after this traumatizing thing, now there's another traumatizing thing. And I was just like, there's no way that this can be my story. And so,
do you think that stress of that breakup contributed to some of the hair loss?
I think it was more the stress eating. Sugar was a big problem. Sugar was aiding the creation of scar tissue and the
Mm.
thinning. So that was a big part of the issue. But one day I sat up in my bed and I started trying to massage my head, to see how mobile my skull and my scalp was. And it was so stiff. What I'm doing on camera right now, where I'm able to move my
Mm.
my scalp back and forth and up and down, I was completely unable to do that. And I knew that for as long as it was so stiff, there was no blood there, there was no oxygen there,
Mm.
there was no healing there. And so I looked up in the heavens and I said, God, please help me. I know there's something that I'm missing. There has to be something else that I can do. And
Mhm.
I knew that that was scarring, and everyone said there's no hope at that point. But at that point, I went into the interwebs and I looked up things I had looked up a million times
So
before. But
you're
this time,
saying that people say that when they're scarring, there's no hope your hair's not going to recover. Hmm.
correct.
Okay.
Even people that specialize in hair loss and thinning,
Mm-hmm.
that's their umbrella safety net. Like, well, if we
Mm-hmm.
didn't get the hair back, it's because it's scarred over. And meanwhile, the dermatologist will say, "Oh, there's nothing we can do. It's just going to spread. All we could do is slow it down." And then I'm saying, "Bring me the scar tissue. I got you." So there's just a lot of discrepancies based on how people are assisting in the condition. But
You
yeah,
brushed
that
over that kind of fast. I want to make sure the audience can hear you. You're saying if you are dealing with scar tissue, you are the person to help them get their hair back.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And the thing is, people will ask themselves this next: how do I know if I have scar tissue? I'm sure
Mhm.
that's on everybody's mind, whoever's listening to this right now. And so a dermatologist will only diagnose it if they do a biopsy and they cut out a little bit of you and they look at it
Mm.
under a microscope. And if they find scar tissue there, then they will assume that you have that all over in other places on your head. However, biopsies, I feel like they're very invasive, and if there are signs that there isn't enough blood flow there, then healing that wound is going to be very difficult. So now not only do you like not have hair, but you have a wound there as well, and that a scar that's going to be there for a while or forever. And so they use that measure to diagnose that, whereas in functional medicine, I'm just looking at the function of the scalp. If people do the test that I said, where you're putting your fingers over your ears and you're trying to push your scalp up and down, front and back, does your scalp wrinkle in the middle? If you're seeing motility, then you don't likely have, meaning, I should say, the more mobile it is, the less of an issue you have. The tighter that is, the less you can move your scalp, the more of a possibility that there is scar tissue there that needs to be broken down.
If a person gets a perm and the perm burns their scalp, is that, are you highly likely to have scar tissue from that or?
How severe is this burn? Because typically, if it's a burn from a perm, that should go away with time, correct?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if it was a third-degree burn, like you escaped a fire, that a house was burning down and your skin melted and it healed with a keloid,
Right.
a completely different, that is something that I can't say with confidence I would be able to help. Although I have heard stories of someone that had a third-degree burn and was still able to regrow their hair. The human body is amazing, but from a perm, that would be, I don't see that as being a huge deterrent for
Okay.
regrowth.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Mm-hmm.
So, but usually the scarring is on the follicular level.
Mm-hmm.
It's under the scalp. You can't see it. It's not like there's a bunch of
Oh.
scabs all over. It's a
Mm.
growth that's happening and it's spreading typically.
Mm.
And what it's doing is it is suffocating your follicle at a root level. So
Mm-hmm.
the way that this presents is, if your hair all of a sudden cannot grow as long, there may be scarring. If your
Mm.
hair texture has changed or it's extremely dry, there may be scarring.
Mm.
If your hair is very, very thin, it used to be thicker and now it just feels thin, it feels see-through, there may
Mm.
be scarring. If you're starting to see that your part is widening, or just overall maybe your crown has a lot less hair and it feels very thin, that's also indicative of scarring.
Wow.
So
Hmm.
I'll give you a picture of how I looked at my worst when I had scarring. It's so,
Wow.
I mean, it's so hard to even see my hair because it was so thin.
Right.
It's completely see-through on the side.
Mm.
I had such a hard time, wanting to walk around and look at and go out dating people and all
Yeah.
of the things when
Especially
I
as
felt
women.
right. Yeah.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
so you can see that in the picture that I just showed, that there was an inability for my hair to be thick. And even in the crown area, there was a big part as well that was growing wider and wider.
So
So
what
that's
are the
part
biggest
of the issue.
contributors to hair loss? Like, why does hair loss occur? I know a lot of people say during menopause or even pre-menopause. I mean, I think it could be so many factors, but what do you think are the most common?
Oh, that's such a great question. Eh, Menopause is something they often use as a reason, and they also say genetics.
Mm,
Those are the key uh, conditions or attributes that people think about when they're considering why this would happen. But it's not that at all. It's really that hair loss and thinning is a lifestyle disease, just like type 2 diabetes,
mm,
just like high cholesterol, just like high blood pressure. Those conditions can be managed. Hair loss can be managed as well. No one's born with these conditions typically, right?
hmm
Type 2 diabetes, you're not born with. Type 1, you are, but this happens with as you age. And
hmm
the reason that is typically because the body is compensating for something that is going wrong. And that's your genetic superpower where it turns it on. It turns on your ability to have thinning hair if, for example, you have some sort of low-grade chronic infection in your skull, in your scalp. Sometimes I see candida overgrowth as a low-grade infection that is very common in women with hair loss and thinning. And it can live on your tongue, it can live in your nails, it can live in your gut, it can live on your scalp. It'll live in these different places on your body and your vagina. People will see yeast infections. So that these are all types of symptoms when people have candida overgrowth. Maybe they're bloated all the time, maybe they're constipated, maybe their tongue is really white, but they'll notice sometimes they're eating something and then their scalp starts to itch and they washed their hair yesterday. So this could be a case that someone begins to develop scar tissue because they have this low grade infection living there and their body's like, you know what, Pamela's not doing anything about this infection. Let's just create some scar tissue and try to heal this for her. But then the
Mm,
problem comes that she continues to eat candy and corn syrup and things that she may even think are healthy, like agave or gluten-free foods that are actually not good for you. And you continue to feed the opportunistic pathogen, you continue to grow the scar tissue, you never create a healing environment. And so it progressively gets worse. And we see this because sometimes women, they'll present with hair loss or thinning, and then all of a sudden it'll get better. And they're like, oh, thank goodness it stopped. But then it comes back worse with a vengeance. And the
mm,
reason being that their body's trying to heal, but they've never gotten to the root cause. And so things just continually get worse, even though your
wow.
body's trying to work on healing.
Wow. Wow. I'm amazed that you know all this stuff. I don't know why, because there's lots of people who research things and become experts and very knowledgeable, but you're blowing me away with how much you know about how all this stuff works.
Well,
So,
I did go to school. I had my background in medicine, spending that much time in conventional medicine. And so
mhm,
these topics, labs, they weren't foreign to me. But
mhm,
when you start researching with the lens of hair loss and thinning, and you're just obsessed with it, every article I read, every book I read, every summit I listened to, I always tried to apply it to hair loss because that was what I was completely obsessed
mm,
with, being that I knew no one was going to be able to help me but me. Like there was, and
mhm.
God. There was just no other way but that. And so I had this relentless pursuit in the process.
Wow. So what? This is taking us, it's on topic, but slightly off topic. What is the purpose of hair in the first place, do you think? Like, why did God give us hair? Like,
I
what
love
what purpose?
I think there are several purposes. The Bible says that hair is a woman's crown.
Mm-hmm.
So as women, we wear that and it makes us feel beautiful. Sometimes we can wear the exact same outfit, but look completely different, more glamorous, more beautiful, just because we did our hair differently that day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
hair is such a big part of our identity and a confidence boost and all of the things. And so I believe that he created hair, one, as an aesthetic blessing for women.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I do feel like it has practical purposes. It can keep us warmer.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
But most importantly, and this is something that I have pioneered based on my experience in this realm of medicine, is the idea that hair can actually become a secondary mechanism of detoxification.
How so?
When your body creates a strand of hair, it creates it from what we call organic matter, and it is pulling out of your blood things like heavy metals into the hair strand because it's made out of organic
Mm.
matter. So when your strand is being created in the follicle, there are hair stem cells that go down into the root, and then there's blood and oxygen, and hopefully that blood is filled with nutrients if the gut is working well. And so that will create the environment necessary for the strand to grow. And as it's growing, it is bringing all the heavy metals with it. Now, when it's time for this strand to move to the scalp in the telogen phase so that another strand can grow under it with new stem cells, that strand is going to fall out with heavy metals. And the
Mhm.
new strand is going to put more heavy metals out of the blood and into the strand. And
Ah.
that's why I often see women that have toxemia and a lot of hormone issues with excessive shedding. When someone comes to my practice with excessive shedding, I'm always thinking about their hormones and I'm thinking about allergies. I'm thinking about the health of their immune system. I'm thinking about their ability to detoxify. I'm thinking about something that I call, or that we call in science, the allostatic load, which is the invisible line in your body that represents the amount of toxicants you can hold without expressing a bunch of symptoms and turning on your genes. So this is the area of when I'm a teenager and I can, drink all night and go to work on time the next day. Just saying
Yeah.
that this is the area where you can eat whatever you want and still lose weight. This is the area under this line, your body is working amazingly. What happens is, as we have grown as civilization, we've developed new technologies, but at the cost of that is just a lot more exposure to toxicants. And so now the toxicants are coming in so quickly, we can't keep up. And so they start to go over that allostatic load. They start to go over the line. And so
Mm.
this is where your body says, okay, well, let me create more cholesterol because she's having so much inflammation from these toxicants that her arteries are starting to get little tears. And this is an actual thing. When you have high cholesterol, it is because your arteries have a little tear, and then your body creates cholesterol to plug that tear. And then that's the bad cholesterol. The good cholesterol is supposed to come over and take over the leftover bad cholesterol so that you don't have oxidation and it'll bring it back to the liver to excrete it. But when you have chronic inflammation, which is one of the 5 non-negotiables that have to be addressed if you're trying to
Mm.
reverse hair loss naturally, then you create an environment where you're consistently producing excess bad cholesterol, but you're not able to produce enough good cholesterol to keep up with it. And then you
Wow.
have plaque in the arteries, which affects circulation, which affects how well blood is getting to your hair, which is another non-negotiable when it comes to reversing hair loss naturally. So besides inflammation and circulation of the blood and the lymphatic system, which is how you detox, it's also sleep, blood sugar balance, and the health of your gut. those things
Wow.
have to be
Mhm.
looked at, optimized, addressed in order to create a version of someone that is able to regrow healthy hair.
Hmm. Wow. And hair is so important to women, especially. It's important to men too. Um, I think we associate it with our identity. Um, and I guess anything that's starting to change what we perceive as our identity, and we usually associate that with our youth, who
Right.
the thickness of hair we had at our youth, the size of our body during our youth, all
Yeah.
of that is the measure. Um, it's so interesting, and hair is so important. I mean, I knew it had more value than, I mean, yeah, we like to look good, but I knew it keeps us warm. But I just wanted to hear from somebody with your level of information. Is it something I'm missing? Is it a greater purpose still?
I mean, that
But
isn't something that you can Google. That's something that I realized in clinical practice, just noticing that I had clients presenting with symptoms of what we call toxemia.
mm,
Just what happens is when your body has too many toxicants, it will take something that's toxic to you and wrap it up in fat and store it later. Why does it do that? It does that to protect your liver, to protect your kidneys. Because if you have way too many toxicants in or toxins in your body at once, and your liver and your kidneys can't handle the wear and tear so quickly, you're creating a lot of free radical damage in your body. And so your body says, let's just deal with it later. But your brain is made out of fat. Your nerves are made out of fat. And sometimes we put on all this fat and we don't know where it came from. And that's part of the process. Your body's doing that to protect you.
mm,
And so I'll see clients present with, oh, I have floaters. I see floaters. And, it's because their vision is being affected from the amount of toxicants
mm,
in their nerves surrounding the eye.
mm,
Or they're having issues with sleep. They're having issues with their libido. They're having issues with going to the bathroom. They're having issues with their nerves tingling. And you would think, oh, there's no way this is related to hair loss. And a lot of doctors would say, oh, that's normal. But it's not, clearly.
mm.
Your body's
Yeah.
definitely turning on that check engine light.
Mhm. Wow.
And it's all related. It's all related.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, um, what are the 5 foods to avoid in order to restore hair? I know you share about that, but can you tell us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So sugar, number one, gluten, number two, corn and rice are on the list as well.
What is
And
it? Rice and what?
corn.
Corn. Mm-hmm.
And dairy as well. Dairy is one that, as you begin to work more on your gut and healing, you'll start seeing less symptoms present from that. That might be something you're able to indulge in more often as you begin to heal. But there is that period where you have to work on healing. But corn and rice actually have gluten in them. And I know that they're labeled as gluten free. And so when I say that, people are shocked. What? But I eat gluten free and all I eat is corn and rice. And you still have symptoms, I bet.
I was wondering, did you say that because they're both starches? It has nothing to do with the starch.
Multiple reasons. It's the
Mm,
gluten aspect of it. So they have a different type of gluten that
mhm,
does not have to be labeled.
mm,
So that's the reason why they get to market it as gluten free.
mhm.
Um, corn has been genetically modified to be sweeter. It's more yellow, it's sweeter. They make corn syrup out of it. Corn syrup is a huge additive, especially here in the States. And
Mhm.
it's also a leading contributor to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, corn syrup.
Really?
Yeah. And so
Mm.
corn is a food that it was meant to proliferate on its own, meaning that if I was a farmer and I had corn, I should just plant it once, and then the wind should carry away the seeds, and magically more corn should show up. But because of how important corn is to American infrastructure as far as the economy is concerned, they created a version of corn that had to be replanted. And so it's just a different corn that
Wow.
is harder for us to digest. And when it comes to rice, it's really just grains, except for grains that are gluten-free. So I tell people buckwheat, quinoa, because quinoa is a seed-like grain. Those are two grains that you can eat that are less problematic, maybe not problematic, but rice, I remember one time I was wearing a continuous glucose monitor just for 2 months, just so I could learn my body, try to understand what do I respond well to? What do I not respond well to? What can I digest well? What do I not digest well? And when I ate, especially the Chinese sticky rice, but with all rice, my glucose would go way too high. But with the sticky Chinese rice that has even more gluten in it, I mean, my blood sugar was like over 200.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it definitely has an effect on your glycemic load. And remember, blood sugar balance is one of the five non-negotiables.
Wow.
So I typically have my clients go through this 21-day process where they eliminate those foods, and I give them recipes, I give them food groups, I give them the things. 3 to 4 times a year, we do it all together as a group, which is pretty cool because we're
Mm.
all sharing recipes together and cheering each other on. And we're seeing the transformations in real time, which I love because no one is worried about, is this going to work? They're like, if it worked for her, then maybe I'm next. So it's a completely different energy. But I have them do that. And they'll tell me, my goodness, my rings, they used to feel tight. They don't feel tight anymore.
Mm.
And I'm having less hair falling out just from changing my diet. You start to see, I lost 10 pounds that I couldn't lose. You start to see these things happening literally just from changing the diet.
Does
And gluten,
caffeine have an effect on hair loss or hair?
so it depends on the source. A green tea every now and then wouldn't be a bad thing. I have a supplement that I use that has very clean sources of caffeine in it.
Okay.
But I'm not gonna lie, every now and then I indulge in some coffee and but I use it as a drug.
Hmm.
If I know I have to focus or be up late or whatever the case is, it's a drug I'm intentionally using and it's not a crutch for my
Right.
everyday life. So I would say caffeine is not a deal breaker. It's just a matter of what's the source and how often are you using it.
Okay. Okay. Um, so tell us about how you've been successful helping women in particular recover from hair or loss of hair. And how can one restore hair loss naturally? I know you've already touched on a lot of that, but if there's anything more you want to share along those lines.
As far as how I've been successful helping women regrow their hair.
Yeah, what are some of the testimonies, if you will?
Oh, well, sure. I have a whole testimonials page on my website, bellecanics.com. So that's BELLECHANICS /testimonials. Because we're mechanics, but there's no me, it's Belle. So we're
Mm,
Bellecanics because we're
okay.
mastering our body mechanics to reveal our inner Belle.
Mm,
So that's why that's why the
okay.
program is called Bellecanics. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say the most rewarding part or the part that helps me be able to get testimonials in the first place is because of how I can identify what triggered this in the first place. I bring my clients through this process where they fill out a 85 question questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
Intense. I'm asking them everything, literally. Like, were you born vaginally or through a C-section? Because that changes how much microbial diversity they have on their skin at birth. All the
Say that again?
whether or not you were born vaginally or through a C-section will determine your microbial diversity. Because if you're going through mom's vagina, you're gonna come into earth getting exposed to a lot of microbes, which is good for your health.
Mm,
Microbial diversity is good. It's one of the things that are needed to help heal the gut.
mm,
But if you were going through a C-section, you came out through her stomach, so you missed out on all that bacteria that could have helped your immune system.
mm.
So that's something. And then all the way to, did you get that virus that was going around and the medication for it? Because for some of my clients, that was the triggering event. There are
Mm.
Facebook groups now about they call it the COVID shed. where
Mm.
it just keeps shedding ever since they got it and it never turned off, and has to do with mast cell activation syndrome and just, their cytokine storms and their body's inability to regulate. And so all of those things help me paint a picture. And what I do is when I have that, before we even meet, I'm asking a gazillion questions because I'm trying to wrap my head around what were all the different trigger points, what were all the different moments in history that set you up for the genetic expression of hair loss and thinning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to reverse engineer what we need to do to create the version of you that can regrow healthy hair. So
Mm-hmm.
I can see, okay, your nervous system needs to be regulated, your lymphatic system needs to be regulated, your digestive system, and so on and so forth. So I can say, in my example, I was born in an old building in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the pipes were dusty and rusty, and we couldn't use the water when that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They took my tonsils out when I was 5 years old. So that's it. Now I'm handicapped for life because that helps my immune system. But if they took them out, clearly there was something in the house that was affecting me and my health
Mm-hmm.
because there's a reason why they were getting swollen.
Mm-hmm.
They took them out. I also had a really hard time as a child because I was overweight. I was obese and I ate way too much to the point where I ended up developing an eating disorder for a very long time. And so I abused food, way too much sugar. That was part of it. I had recurring yeast infections, and I remember screaming at my gyno, and I was like, "What are you doing? Like you keep taking antibiotics. Do better!" Like I was just like this rebellious teenager. And I was like, "I know this isn't right because every time I take it, it comes back." So
Right.
I remember seeing mucus in my stool, and I Googled some hotline, and I called them like, "Is this normal?" They're like, "Yeah, it's normal." That wasn't normal. That was not normal, but this was like what, 2007, 2008. There was so much that we didn't know yet. We're talking about, more than 10 years later. So I had amalgams. They put mercury in my mouth. I had amalgam fillings. Well, because I got cavities. So they put those in my mouth. I had them, I don't know how long. Then they took them out. And when they took them out, they didn't dispose and handle that delicately. So
Mm-hmm.
I got more exposure to heavy metals. And so all this while, I'm still having beautiful hair, getting good sleep. Starting to see little symptoms here and there. But the
Mm-hmm.
big explosion happened when I got off of birth control.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when my body said, okay, you got me. That's it. I gotta start compensating for this somehow. And the reason was that I developed estrogen dominance. My body was receiving synthetic progesterone and it was being tricked into thinking it was pregnant. So it wasn't used to harmonizing hormones and producing them in the right quantities. When I took that patch off, estrogen just went crazy and it started proliferating. And that was, in a way, that with my diet was suppressing my progesterone, and it started slowly declining. And when you're estrogen dominant, it becomes very difficult for your body to actually detox you
Mm-hmm.
with bile. Your gallbladder holds bile. Bile conjugates with toxins, you poop them out. But when you have estrogen dominance, the bile gets very clumpy, so it's harder to detoxify. And
Wow.
you also create an enzyme that releases more estrogen out that you're trying to poop out. So it becomes this perpetuating cycle where it just becomes increasingly difficult to detox. Then I start developing toxemia. Start getting all these symptoms. Then I got exposure to mold. And then it got even worse because I was way over my allostatic load. And so that was my story, but I have other stories with clients where this one lady was fine until she reached, I don't know if it was like her 30s or 40s. She became vegetarian and then she started developing scar tissue. And she didn't even realize
Mm-hmm.
at the time that that was a trigger. I was the one who suggested it because she started eating too much sugar at the time. She was
Mm-hmm.
eating fruit, 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 fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were also some hormonal changes going on. So that contributed to her issue. She was also a painter. And so she had a lot of toxins from her job. And so that
Wow.
was affecting her ability, to detox. I think she had been on birth control at one point. I'm not exactly sure. But I know that there was another client, her triggering event was when she got the shot. She was fine before that. She got Lyme disease when she was younger. They put her on a month's worth of antibiotics. So that right there destroyed her gut. Then on top of that, she moved into a moldy home. And there were different things that were happening. And then the thing that tipped the domino that got everything to fall
Mhm.
was getting the shot. She got COVID and she didn't have a problem. When she had the shot, that's what threw her over the edge. It crossed her allostatic load. And
Mhm.
so when I put that picture together for people, then I'm able to say, okay, so deeply rooted, what we have here is your hormones are unable to regulate and your gut isn't working well because you completely stripped it of the bacteria it needs to help your immune system act normally. And
Mhm.
I'm able to really piece together the whole puzzle and help them understand why we need to support these different systems, what happened in their life that led to that necessity, why their body's having a hard time doing it on their own, and how we're going to do it together over a period of 6 months or a year, or sometimes 2 months. So depending on how people need my help.
Wow. So,
I even had a lady that had hair loss for 25 years. And her triggering event was she had the bypass surgery. So they took out 2/3 of her colon. She said, Surreal, I don't see how in the world you're going to help me regrow my hair when I'm literally missing 2/3 of my colon. How are the nutrients even going to get into my blood? And I said, Girl, the problem is the scar tissue. She was like, Scar tissue? No one ever told me I had scar tissue. I said, I see how you're thinning. I've known you for years. I've been watching you. I'm so glad you finally came to
mm,
me. Okay, your issue is scar tissue, trust me. And started working with her. Within 4 or 5 months, her hair got so much thicker, and it was like here in the crown that it was happening.
wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So, we're at the point where I ask every guest the same question, and it's this. If the audience forgets everything we just talked about, what is the one gem where you'd say, don't forget this one thing?
Well, there's a book that I wrote that I'm happy to gift to your audience. It's called Becoming a Volcanic. And I'll
Becoming a
Becoming a
volcano.
Volcanic. Yeah.
Okay.
And I can give you the information to put in the show notes. But it teaches you the art of listening to your body.
Mm,
And so, my big pearl of wisdom to impart on your community forever is this. If you're feeling any kind of symptom, it is not normal.
mm-hmm,
There is a reason
mm-hmm,
that this symptom is expressing. Your body is dynamic and it is always responding to the stimuli around it, it is always responding to the environment. And so, the best thing that you can do to take care of your health on an ongoing basis, because nobody in the world is more interested in taking care of you than you.
mm-hmm,
Okay?
mm-hmm,
No doctor in the world is going to care more about that than you.
mm-hmm,
Is to learn to catch the trends, learn to listen to those symptoms, learn to try to understand what could those symptoms mean based on your choices.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So listen to your body in a way where you're honoring what it's saying and you're trying to guess what it doesn't like so that you can stop doing that. And
mm-hmm,
that is going to give you more longevity, more vitality, beauty long into your later years, all of those things. And it's all based on this premise that your body is trying to communicate with you. Don't ignore it. Sooner or
mm-hmm,
later, if you don't pay attention, it's going to whack you outside off of the head.
mm-hmm.
It's not going to be just hair loss anymore. It's going to be something way more serious.
Wow. So if you have a symptom, basically believe it and get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, well, get to the bottom of it in the sense that you are being aware of when the symptom comes up. How often does it come up? For example, when my clients eat too much sugar, oftentimes they'll get pain in their scalp, or they'll get bloated, or the tongue will get white. There's certain things that happen when you eat sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're noticing that, let that be a sign not to eat as much sugar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at one point, my bedroom was making me sick and there was mold in there and it was in the attic. So there was no way for me to discover it because I don't
Mm-hmm.
go around walking upside my attic, but I knew that something was wrong because I would go to sleep. And every time I was going to sleep, I would have gas. I would just start passing gas next to my husband. I'm like, sorry, babe. Like, I don't know what's I ended up having to move to the other room sometimes. Or
Okay.
like I would wake up really, really thirsty. Or I would wake up and my hair was thinner. So there were things that were always happening when I spent 8 hours in that room. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was just like, let me listen to my body. Let me try sleeping somewhere else. And I noticed the symptoms improved. And so I saved myself from that kind of exposure to toxins. And my body was trying to tell me, hey, we're trying to compensate for something that that you're ignoring. You know, we
How
have
did you
to.
find out it was mold though?
I eventually hired a company to come and investigate, and
Oh.
I used what website was it? I think it's IAP, or I'd have to look it up and then get back to you on it. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe when I do, you can share it with your community. But
Mm-hmm.
it was a website that was particularly for environmental specialists, not just your regular AC company. And so their level of investigation was completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to find the mold in one of my closets and also in the attic. And my husband remediated that. And I realized that there was an improvement in how I felt based on that. But even dust was a problem for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I noticed one night I was going to sleep and my husband was already sleeping. I like to sleep with noise in the background because I grew up in New York City with alarms and
Mm-hmm.
sirens, all night long. There was never
Mm-hmm.
any silence. And I got up to turn on the air cleaner, and as soon as I turned it on, he starts snoring. He doesn't snore. My heart starts beating really fast. I said, "This is a stress response." And something happened with the air quality because he started to snore. What changed? I turned on the air cleaner. I got it. The filter's dirty. And so cleaning the
Mm-hmm.
air, it's making the air worse.
Mm-hmm.
My body is just got exposed because people think, oh, dust is harmless. Dust is everywhere. What is dust gonna do to you? Hello, like we don't walk around clothed in 100% organic cotton. We have a bunch of synthetic material everywhere all day long, plus all of the pollution coming from outside. So, we're this dust isn't as innocent as it used to be. So that is also another part of the problem, and it could become toxic to people. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is what I mean about listening to your body. In the book that I wrote, it talks about that. It has even a tracker in there. It's
Mm-hmm.
how to practice it, to practice noticing what did you eat? What were your pooping habits like that day? What
Right.
symptoms did you get? And how did your hair change? Because they're all connected.
Mm. Wow. Amazing. So now we're at the point where we're at the end of the show, and I'd like to have my guests share how the audience can get in touch with you to get your services, to get your book, anything else you want to share. If there's if I didn't ask you a question but there was still something you really passionately want to share, this is the time to go for it.
Oh, well, if anyone is there wondering, but could this work for me? But could this work for my hair loss? I do have a quiz and it's on my website. So if you just go to www.belcanix.com, the quiz will pop up, but it's also at the top of the page, or you could just do /quiz. And it is a quiz that tries to gauge whether or not we would have success in helping you regrow your hair naturally based on the results we already have in our practice.
Mm,
And then at the end of that quiz, there is an opportunity to book a call with me. So typically there is a cost for that call, but if your audience puts in the word consult in capital letters, CONSULT, then that cost will be waived. So if someone's watching this and they're just like, oh, I just want to talk to her about my symptoms and see what could happen, then that's another gift for you guys. So you can go ahead and take the opportunity to connect and talk to me for 30 minutes or so just to see what's happening with your hair and if functional medicine can help you with it.
Well, thanks for that. And I have to say, Saril, this has been a wonderful conversation, an educational conversation. And you are so delightful. Just your personality and your expressions, your passion for this topic certainly comes across. And again, I admire the depth of information that you hold on this topic. You're a true expert, and I encourage people to seek you out and for your services as it relates to this. You cover the whole gamut. You're personable. So again, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for having me.
You're welcome.